Ladies and gentlemen, it is a historic episode this week on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. I'm not going to do a lot of preamble as I normally do and a lot of hype because, well, quite frankly, it's kind of like a messy situation for us to finally get this episode going. But this is still an historic episode, being the 74th episode of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast lifetime. If you have somehow joined us for all 74 episodes, you're a trooper, and you should probably get some sort of like purple heart or something, or maybe a little bit less than that. But it is historic because finally now, it was Rick first, then me, and now Justin. Finally, every single person on this show has been on an episode via phone at least one time. That's why Justin's quality is actually so much better than mine in this episode, because I'm using a laptop from like 2015, and he's using a phone that is relatively new, well, newer than my laptop, most definitely. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your favorite podcast that is all about fun, football, and chaos. It is the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. All football, all the time. And Justin, finally, week one came and went. And it was an interesting week, to say the least. But, of course, joined by one of my fellow agents of chaos, the games master, Justin. Justin, how we doing?
It's been a tough week.
Yeah.
It's been a very tough week.
As the people can see by the title, oh no, SpaghettiOs indeed, ladies and gentlemen. It was a tough week for New York sports fans all around because while the Giants just got slaughtered, as we'll get into in a few moments, and the Jets, they did win the battle of Monday Night Football. But have they lost the war? We'll talk about that most certainly in this episode because a little bit later. Well, contractually, yes. Later on in the episode, we're going to go through the highlights of week one. As we kind of discussed last week, a new thing we're going to do this season is not necessarily go through every single game that happened in week one. We might briefly mention like certain games week by week, but we're going to go through like what is the biggest stories to talk about from the previous week. So for this, of course, we're going to talk about the biggest things that happened in week one. And then we're going to touch a little bit into Thursday Night Football before we go to the main event, as always, for the show. The hashtag SAOC pick challenge. I believe at this present moment in time, Justin is in first place. I think I am in second place. I don't know if I'm tied with Rick for second or if he's third. And I think the pirate Billy Shakes is in last place definitively. So already off to a better start for Rick over the mascot this year than last season. So we got that. Actually, all three of us have more points after 1 week from last year. So Justin, we're on the up and ups on this show.
Listen, last year, we started off a little rough. I remember I lost, I think, all but one of my games for the first 2 weeks.
Right.
I won one game each week, so it was a rough start. But listen, we picked it up again this year.
And it was especially the Broncos that were giving you troubles.
Yeah, I stopped picking the Broncos.
I can't wait to see how long it'll take this season before you actually do end up picking Denver. So we'll have some fun with that, to say the very least. Of course, as everyone sees, the Podfather is not with us in this present moment in time, ladies and gentlemen. But don't you worry, he will join us in some way, shape, or form later in the episode. The Podfather never is truly gone, even when he doesn't start an episode of the pod. So, with that being said, we have plenty of football to talk about. We have our chaos at the end. Let's start with a little bit of fun. Now, because of the, whole situation here, Justin is unable to provide the trivia. But, ladies and gentlemen, just because we don't have our future game show host of America here, doesn't mean we don't have trivia. It's just the home brand version of the trivia. Like, you want the Big Mac at McDonald's, you have burgers at home. You want soda from the store, you got RC Cola at home. The knockoff brand, per se. Well, this right here is the knockoff brand of trivia, a.k.a. Wah. So, courtesy, as always, of our friends at CBS Sports, because they just love posting random facts and stuff, which I'm very appreciative of, by the way. Jalen Hurts, this actually ties into the Thursday night game perfectly, so this is absolutely phenomenal. Jalen Hurts is just the fourth quarterback, Justin, since the year 2000 to go 19-1 or better in a 20-start span. So he's just the fourth quarterback ever to do that. 3 other guys have done so. Can you name the other 3?
Go 19-1 in a 20-game span. Since when?
Since the year 2000.
So Brady's got to be one of them, right?
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, because they had that crazy. Does this include the playoffs?
It doesn't necessarily say the playoffs, but No, I will say no, because if it did include the playoffs, then I think we'd have 2 losses in here for Hurts, because he lost the Super Bowl and he lost that game to Washington last year that he started. So I would most likely guess no.
Okay, that makes sense. So the next one I would say is I think Aaron Rodgers, because I think that they had the year they won the Super Bowl, they went on a crazy run. I know they were the 6th seed. But they lost. They won like a ton of games at the end of the season to like make it into that 6th seed, and then they went 13-3 the next year. So I'm gonna say Aaron Rodgers is another quarterback.
Right. It is not a bad guess, and personally, if I had the time, I would actually love to go back. Maybe I'll do that post show to qualify that later if I get the time here. But Aaron Rodgers is not one of the QBs to do so. But that's not a bad guess, because you mentioned the season after they won the Super Bowl. I think they actually went 15-1 in that season.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and the one loss I remember, it was against the Romeo Crennel coached Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, it was dark days for Kansas City back then, to say the very least. So very much different from what they have now.
Okay, so it's not Aaron Rodgers. Tom Brady was one of them. Now, I'm trying to think of other guys that had like a crazy record. I know Cam Newton and the Panthers had a really good year one year, but I don't remember if they followed it up. Excuse me. With did they go 15-1 that year? The
Yeah,
year they won the Super Bowl.
yeah, the season he won the MVP and they went to the Super Bowl, they did go 15-1.
You might as well use it, right? Let's go Cam Newton.
Unfortunately, no. Superman is not one of the options. But
So these
again,
15-1 seasons don't make a difference.
they don't, because I think it's tricky, because it doesn't necessarily, because it just says 20 start span. So when you think about it, you kind of have to consider, how did they finish the previous regular season, how they do at the start of the next season. And what I remember actually is that the season after that Super Bowl, I think they opened the 2016 season with a rematch between the Broncos and Panthers in Week 1, and the Broncos did defeat the Panthers in that.
Okay, so then let's think about teams that start off strong. And I don't see the thing is I don't know it's the 2 seasons combined screws with me a little bit, because I could think of all these teams that like, all right, you started off 10-0 in a season, you had a great year. You started off, 8-0 in a season, and they had a great winning streak, but I don't know what they did the year before. It's hard to remember that. Like now I'm thinking, if you remember Big Ben's second to last year,
Yeah.
they started off 10-0.
Yeah.
They beat the Bills week 1, but then they had a fairly easy schedule after that for a while. I don't remember if they won 9 out of 10 games the year before.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, I
mean,
will
they
say
were
this:
good the year before. I know they made the playoffs the year before.
yeah, the key to this is specifically the quarterback for the
Well,
team.
Big Ben was the quarterback.
Right. When I say that, it's like, think about it, because there could have been times where maybe the team lost, but the quarterback wasn't playing anymore. You know what I mean? Like maybe they rested him. Like it could be a situation where, like Jalen Hurts, for example, is in this because last season the only games the Eagles only lost one game with him in the lineup. The other 2 they lost. He missed due to
True.
injury, and he didn't play in the last game of the season. So
that makes it even harder for me to remember. Like I'm not gonna know. All right, well this guy missed 2 of the games, so I can't even go up to team records. So I mean, I want to throw out a guy like Peyton, but I don't know for sure. It's just a guess at this point. Since 2000, you might as well. He's the cream of the crop. So let's go with Peyton.
Peyton Manning is indeed the third of these QBs. So we got Jalen Hurts, Tom Brady, and Peyton Manning, all who have done so. I really wish it said specifically which 20-game stretch it was for these guys. As I said, it's trivia at home for a reason. I don't have the total depth of it that Justin does, ladies and gentlemen, but it's still pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And 19-1 in a 20-game stretch is wild.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
So we got 3 of the 4, Justin. We need 1 more.
But we got to think, who else has been an electric QB since 2000? I want to say Brett Favre is up there, but I don't think he was ever that consistent. Drew Brees also had excellent runs. Philip Rivers, maybe. I don't think it was Eli. Eli again, they were very inconsistent. Could be a guy like McNabb too. I mean, he had a ton of success, especially early in Philly. They were a nasty team, specifically on offense. I mean, they had a good defense too, but that offense was electric. I'm trying to think of guys that really went on like a solid run.
Well, like you said, I will say this. What you mentioned before about starting off hot, that is, I think, most likely a key with all these guys, because from Hurts to Peyton and Tom, and then this last guy, it is all about getting off to a hot start to the season. And for the most part, these are guys who, like, if we look at the week one career records for Peyton and Brady, it's probably pretty good. Like, I can't think off the top of my head too many times where either of those guys did lose in week one. They have pretty pristine records.
Is the fourth guy still active?
Yes.
So that narrows it down. Part of me wanted to turn around and say Tua, because I know he's got like a crazy record for when he starts and finishes games. But I don't know if he's played that many games in his 3 years.
Right. So, it is a legitimate question to ask. Has he even started 20 full games yet?
Yeah. So I don't think it's him. I'm hard pressed to believe that you would have gave me a question where Russell Wilson is the answer, but I'm not ruling it out yet.
Wouldn't have even bothered.
And the only other person I could think of at the moment would probably be Stafford. Unless there's another top quarterback I'm missing. It wasn't Rodgers.
Well, Stafford's interesting considering the fact that there are a lot of Detroit years in there you got to reconsider about.
Yeah, I don't think he won that much. That was the issue. And he's still an active quarterback. Who else is good and still active? Is it Mahomes?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Mahomeboy is the fourth quarterback. Technically, he was third, but you know what I mean. He is the fourth answer here on the list of QBs to go 19-1 in a 20-start span. And it kind of makes sense because the last couple seasons when Patrick Mahomes, he'll miss a game or two here and there in the regular season. And it's kind of 50-50 on how the Chiefs do in those games for the most part. And I think if you look at the amount of, the Chiefs games where he starts and finishes, I'd love to see that career record because I can't imagine. I can't imagine it's too far up in the double digits in terms of the losses. I'm sure it's a pretty pristine record if you ask me, which has just shown that, again, the Kansas City Chiefs have been the power in the AFC for the last half decade or so, and they've had the guy to do it. And then you couple that with Brady and Manning, who were the two powers in the AFC, of course, beforehand, and Brady was pretty good in the NFC as well, although I'm willing to bet that his 20-game stretch here was more so on his time when he was a New England Patriot because, they had an undefeated season, people. And they basically, if you include the Super Bowl, they were pretty close to a 20-game stretch when you think about it. So probably the last game of the previous season. So all in all, yeah, those are the four guys. And Jalen Hurts joining them is very interesting company, to say the least, in a season that has been an interesting start for the Philadelphia Eagles, to say the least. It's been 2-0 for them with the games they've won in relative interesting fashion, we could say. But we'll get to the Thursday night game against the Minnesota Vikings here in a couple of moments. Before we get to that, Justin, week one stories and observations that we have. We're going to kind of do this as we go week by week here in the season and kind of pick certain, games that stood out to us, certain performances, etc. And I think one way, Justin, that I think this is perfect with us doing the pick challenge as well. It kind of depending on which games that we picked in our pick challenges, obviously we pay attention to the games we have selected the most. You're also in fantasy, so you pay attention to a lot of guys. So in theory, Justin's kind of sort of has his hands everywhere in all 14 to 16 games that happen on any given Sunday. But strictly speaking here on the show, there are 4 games in particular that we are all always focused in on. Maybe 5, depending on if you guys picked your teams or not, which... Did Rick pick the Bears last week? I think he did, right?
I don't remember. I'm not the keeper of picks.
Fair point. So let's actually... I know I didn't pick them. So let's actually get to that game here first and foremost, Justin. Because if there's one story that I took away from that Packers-Bears game, is that, Big Brother is still Big Brother. and they whooped them in that one, to say the very least. What were your thoughts about Jordan Love's, not his debut, obviously. He started a handful of games over the last couple seasons whenever Rodgers was out. But let's be real here. First game as the bona fide number one starter for the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love helped, and Aaron Jones, yes, but Jordan Love tore apart the Chicago Bears, and the Bears just did not look good.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line was rough. It really was. The Packers lived in the backfield, and I know I've said several times about how much I love this Packers defense going in this year. They're young, they're hungry, they get after the quarterback, they play well in the secondary. But yeah, Fields really had nowhere to go. He had almost no help. They had a little bit of decent running from Khalil Herbert, but I mean, as soon as they were out of the game, which was fairly early in the second half, they started giving the ball to Roshan Johnson and Deontay Foreman, who, again, they weren't really doing much. Aaron Jones ran all over this team. Unfortunately, he did injure his hamstring. They're thinking he may not play this week, which is not good for the Packers. But they really didn't look good. Justin Fields looked okay. I mean, he looked as difficult to tackle as ever, like he did last year. And every time he thought he was wrapped up until he was on the ground, you had to keep playing, because if not, he scrambled for 20 yards. But guys weren't really open. DJ Moore did okay, but there was really no offense, and there was almost no resistance on defense, at least for the running game. I know that they were also missing Christian Watson in Green Bay. Dubes did fairly well. I think he caught 2 touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken. Dubes had 2, and Jones had 2. But it's not the hot start that you were hoping you would get, especially for a game that seemed fairly close going into the half.
Yeah, close going into the half, and for all intents and purposes, a game that it was believed that this was going to be the refresh for the Chicago Bears team this season, that finally you were going to beat older brother who's punished you for so long. But, yeah. Narratives stay narratives sometimes. It's hard. There's a reason why it's hard to break narratives in sports, and why we do need to see it to believe it. I'm there with you. I think one thing that was a bit overlooked in the analysis of the Chicago Bears during the offseason, depending on who's talking about, I think our show for the most part was grounded in terms of, like, I think the Bears, if you're third in this division this year, I think you should consider that a victory. Now, some Chicago Bears fans, some that may or may not be an enemy of somebody on this show, were very, very much hyping up the Chicago Bears. And I think, like, all around NFL Twitter, when it comes to Bears fans, they were all in on, like, this team taking a massive leap, like a bigger leap than most would have imagined. And I think the thing that we kind of failed to realize is, like, yes, they did add DJ Moore, but there ain't a lot else on offense aside from DJ Moore.
They added DJ Moore, but they had no receivers last year. Mooney's always hurt.
Yeah.
The kid they drafted, I think, didn't play very well. They traded for Chase Claypool, who didn't do anything. Yeah. Cole Kmet has to spend all his time blocking. They drafted a lineman, but their offensive line is still in shambles. It's not great. Their run game is average at best. I mean, I like Khalil Herbert. He's on my fantasy team, to be honest. But he's not,
he's not a bell back. He's not.
And you traded away Khalil Mack last year. You've cut guys in the secondary. I mean, I understand you made some big name signings, but this was a bare bones team. This is not, hey, you improved enough that this year you're going to the Super Bowl. There's not, hey, you improved this year that maybe you'll make the playoffs. I mean, it's a weak NFC, but this is a bare bones team, and they're a young team, and they're going to have to add a lot more pieces for this to get better anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was a stark reality for Chicago Bears of there's still plenty of work to do on that team, because we saw a lot of things, like, even ignoring the offense, let's say, the defense got picked apart. They got picked.
Yeah.
Eddie Jackson in particular. Have you seen the quote? Like, Eddie Jackson got torn to shreds, I think, by a former Bears player, who basically just questioned Eddie Jackson's, like, work ethic and saying he's, like, lazy and all that stuff. And I'm like, God dang, like, Eddie Jackson to me is, like, one of the 5 to 7 best safeties in football, at least. Maybe closer to top 10, but Eddie Jackson's a good safety. To see him get torn to shreds like that, I'm like, dang, it was not a good day for the Bears.
Well, look, and again, I'm not trying to disparage the Bears. I actually like a lot of the moves they made this offseason, but you need to be more than a couple of, like, they were not in good position when they made a good couple of moves. They weren't a good couple of moves away.
Right.
They made a good couple of moves to get themselves in position to start building a team.
Yeah. Yeah, the way I would say is that I know you're not the biggest NBA guy, Justin, but like years ago there was a draft prospect called I think Bruno Cabalico. I may
Mhm.
have butchered his last name totally, and I remember like everyone on the NBA community memes about it. But the analysis on his draft night was that he was 2 years away from being 2 years away. And that's kind of what the Chicago Bears like offseason was when like we're gonna give it a few more weeks, but I think it's safe to say that what the Chicago Bears moves this past offseason were these were the moves to help them set up for the next set of moves to
Well,
be in a better situation.
let me just say this. I know they're playing Tampa Bay this week in Tampa. The Packers defense is among the top defenses in the league.
Right.
Tampa's defense, at least along that front line, is just as good.
Right.
So we're not necessarily going to see really what the Bears are, I think, this week either. I said maybe because Justin Fields has the ability to get out of the pocket and be slippery, they end up having to sit some guys back, and all of a sudden they can take advantage by a couple of good runs and maybe a couple of good throws. But I'm not really expecting the Bears to come out of the gate firing against Tampa. And it's not like they got an easy schedule coming up the next few weeks. I mean, they play Kansas City, then Denver, then Washington. You know what I mean? So it's going to be rough sledding. I expect them to see maybe try and get some improvement later in the year.
Right.
They have a stretch where they play Arizona, Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit. Like, not horrible teams, but, teams that might not be playing for a playoff spot or might already have sealed a playoff spot late in the year.
Right.
And then we'll see what they're made of then. But yeah, it's going to be tough sledding for this Bears team.
Absolutely. And the again, this is a big year because you get those 2 first-round picks in this next draft. Justin Fields' performance is very much going to be scrutinized every single week, not even just by us in terms of podcasts and content creators, not just in terms of analysts on TV, but in terms of the organization itself, because Ryan Poles, even with, Rick's overreacting to that Packers game, like I think of the 3 of them, Poles is the one most secure in his job because most general managers at least get a second head coach. Matty Eberflus was his first head coach hire, and I don't even think Poles was the GM when Justin Fields was drafted, if I'm not mistaken. So, like,
I don't think so. I think if you remember last year, my bold prediction was that Fields would be out,
right,
and then he lit up teams, at least running the ball.
yeah,
So we expect to see him get his passing game under control this year. Hopefully he can do that. You got to pull for the kid, but he hasn't really shown a lot passing wise, which is another reason why they're stacking that box.
right. So it's going to be interesting, but just again, this is way down the line, but just something to keep in tabs on a week by week basis. And of course, we have a Bears fan on the program. Is that Yeah, I know, but what is it going to look like here for the Chicago Bears going forward? Because again, Ryan Poles, there's going to be they have to make a decision by the end of the season on what the future of the franchise is going to be, and this is not the best start to say the very least. Of course, it's 17 games is the report card, but the first game it's not a passing grade. Can't even give this a C, and as we know, C's can get you the degrees, ladies and gentlemen. But we do not always say you shouldn't always just go for the bare minimum. Every once in a while. Anyways, moving on from that. Like I said, we're not going to go over every single game that happened, but just, an interesting set of games in the 1 o'clock hour, which kind of overall, let's go back to the 1 o'clock hour here. Kind of a set of games here in reality, because a good chunk of them were blowouts, and like 1 or 2 of the close games for the most part were just, like, I don't really think a lot of people cared for a Saints-Titans close game. The highlight of that game for us personally was just the fact that Rick actually texted us saying that Tennessee did take the points, and he was actually not a fan of them taking the points, which goes against his entire philosophy, actually. So that was a very interesting thing that happened. We'll get a chance to grill him about it maybe this later on in this episode or next week potentially. So we'll see about that. Like you mentioned, the Buccaneers just now, Justin. The Buccaneers defeated and upset the Minnesota Vikings, which was a bang on upset choice from last week. So you got to give Rick a lot of props there for calling that one and saying it could happen, very much so. That was a great one right there. The Vikings frauds? I think so. But moving on from that, there were a couple surprising results, you could say, in the 1 o'clock hour, Justin. Let's go to 2 blowouts in particular here, just really quick back-to-back. The Cleveland Browns defeated the Cincinnati Bengals very handily, 24-3, and the San Francisco 49ers really did a number on the Pittsburgh Steelers in this one, 30-7. To say the very least, the two AFC North teams that a lot of people had a lot of belief in, of course, with the Bengals and some people with the Steelers. Not a great banner first week, to say the very least. Now, for the Bengals, there's a lot of various things that people could try to point to. Joe Burrow did miss a lot, basically the entirety of the preseason due to his calf. And I think we did kind of see that he wasn't 100% in that game, to say the very least. And just overall, like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins were not as effective. Just the Cleveland Browns, a very talented team for all intents and purposes, absolutely stifled the Cincinnati Bengals offense. And then you look at that 49ers Steelers game. I mean, we've all seen the graphic at some point over the last week. It was 199 yards to 1 at one point. It was bad for that Niners Steelers game. And as I said, my biggest X factor for the Steelers this season and why I picked them to miss the playoffs early on is Matt Canada, man. And he's still not looking to be the best possible offensive coordinator. Again, I understand it is week 1. And I also understand I'm seeing a lot of people commenting about the fact that maybe Kenny Pickett wasn't 100% because at some point in the game, Kenny Pickett kind of got rocked and he didn't look the same after it. So some people were trying to conflate it to what was happening with Tua last season and, questions. Again, I didn't fully watch the game, so I didn't see the hit personally, or I don't know if it was a specific hit, or I didn't see Pickett from first half to second half if there was really a drop-off in play. So I will leave that to the Steelers fans to say, which I think we all know what they're going to say. But Justin, your thoughts on those two games, the Bengals and the Steelers, two teams that, well, I have one of them in the wild card. I think, did you pick the Steelers as a wild card team?
No.
Okay. But I think Rick did. So he has both of them in his wild card. Or actually, no, he has both of them making the playoffs. He didn't have Baltimore making the wild card, which interesting. Let's talk about the tough losses those two teams had to deal with in week 1.
So this is an issue that Cincinnati has been dealing with for a few years now. And it's that slow start bug. Whatever happens at the beginning of the season. I mean, Joe Burrow had a full preseason last year, and they still started off 0-2. If you remember, it was rough sledding for them right in the beginning, and it's something that's going to shoot them in the foot in the playoff race. I mean, these are games that they should be at the very least be competitive in, and it's not like they have an easy matchup coming up this week. Even if it's at home, it's against Baltimore, so it's something they should be worried about. I've never been a huge fan of the staff in Cincinnati. I know that they went to a Super Bowl, but I mean, they've drafted pretty well. So, but again, they haven't, in their whole tenure, they haven't been able to protect Joe Burrow. They haven't really been able to replace guys that they lose. And I don't think the coaching is always so sound. But that's just me. I don't know what it is. And in terms of Pittsburgh, let's call it what it is. I mean, San Francisco has been one of the most dominant defenses we've seen in a long time, and it's not like it's brand new. It was the same as last year. It was the same the year before. Kenny Pickett's a guy that's still developing. He had his ups and downs last year. He's going to have his ups and downs this year. The schedule didn't do him any favors. This is going to be a rough one. And look, it's not like it's going to get any easier because he's going to play Cleveland now. He's going to have Myles Garrett in his face now. So, look, it is what it is. You got to learn to play under pressure, and hopefully he can overcome these weaknesses. But, it's not something that's going to get any. And you know what? I got to call out Najee Harris a little bit too, because as much as I love the kid, they need more consistent production out of him. And if it's not going to be from him, they need to get it somewhere else. I know they've been trying to improve that offensive line. It was not great coming into both of these kids' tenures, but, something needs to be done on offense because they're not going to be able to throw the ball if they can't run the ball.
Yeah, and you can only do so. Again, I've pointed out Matt Canada for a number of reasons. I don't think he's long for a job in this league if there's another week or two like that.
It could be the coaching. I don't really know it as well in Pittsburgh. We're big Tomlin stands on this show, and I can't imagine it's his fault. But yeah, it's not ideal.
Yeah, to say the very least. And I will say this when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals, like you mentioned, big week 2 matchup coming up here against the Baltimore Ravens. And you mentioned the fact that, how this Bengals team deals with loss. They're going to have to deal with it a lot. Remember, there was a good chunk of roster turnover with this team, which included the loss of their starting safety tandem from last season, Jesse Bates and Von Bell. who both left in free agency, both to the NFC South. Like this Bengals team, like this defense, especially quarterback room, especially corners and safeties, is very young, and they're gonna have to get better real quick. Now,
Bates had a good game this week, right? Didn't Bates have a pick? Did Bates have a pick six?
Did he have a pick six?
I know he scored on Bryce Young.
Let me.
No, that was the kid from Alabama.
I have the game log right here.
That was for the Titans. The kid from Alabama, Branch. I think it was Bates.
There is no pick six in the score summary from what I'm seeing. It was just Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and Tyler Algier.
Well, there was a pick in that game, and it was in their own territory, so maybe it led to a touchdown afterwards. But
probably. Oh well, Jesse Bates, 2 interceptions. That's what we're thinking.
Yeah. Listen, I told you he played well.
Oh yeah. No, I didn't disagree. Just that pick six, but we won't mention them this week because again, so many games to potentially look through. But I will say, Justin, I'm not going to be shocked if in another week or two we could potentially be talking about the Atlanta Falcons a little bit because this Atlanta Falcons team, they're pretty good. They're looking
good against Carolina. Yeah,
they did. Now, unfortunate for us because we both picked the Panthers, but I believe in Bryce Young. But if Arthur Smith has found something with this two-headed running attack that is in Atlanta between Bijan and Algier. Oh man, I think we may have severely last season. The Eagles were the team that both Rick and I underestimated going into the season. So it's only apropos that the Bird team, and it was the Seahawks for all of us last season, but I think you pointed out for yourself sometimes, I think particularly for you, it's only apropos that yet another Bird team is going to prove us wrong again.
I knew it wasn't going to be the Cardinals, so
most definitely not.
Well, let me say this: they get Cordell Patterson back this week as well.
Oh my goodness, man!
He's expected to play this week.
They just have weapons to play with there in Atlanta. If Arthur Smith can really figure this out, this Atlanta team is going to be something to say the least. And even if they don't finish with the best possible record at the end of the season, if they do end up getting one of these rookie QBs, which it might be Deion Sanders' kid that they draft for all we know, that kid's going to come into Atlanta with a lot of weapons to play with.
Shedeur Sanders.
Hey, could be something there.
He's a first-round pick now.
Yeah, look, I'm all for the Colorado hype, but let's take a step back on calling people first-round picks 2-3 games into the college football season.
He's a quarterback.
Yeah, very true. I mean, again, this to me, I said this with last year's draft class. This right now is a 2-quarterback draft class definitively for college football. We're going to media hype the hell out of it to make it a 4-5 quarterback a first-round quarterback class.
This is hype season, and then once the Super Bowl is over and we have the lead up to the draft, this will become the weakest draft in memory. And
yes,
it's just completely lacking skill position at the top. There's 15 guys that are good. Nobody else will be good. And every year.
So, every single year we fall for the trap. Don't fall for it.
It gets worse every year.
Honestly, it really does. We need, one day when this podcast has got all its analytical chops together, we should do an analysis of the draft analysis. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's a fun little project. Well, it wouldn't be a little project, but a fun project that we can.
That's something we do when we have interns.
Exactly. All right. So, looking at the rest of the 1:00 hour games, the Cardinals have begun their tank, their collapse for Caleb, as I've dubbed it. So great start there for themselves. And the Jacksonville Jaguars were able to overcome a bit of a tough start, relatively speaking, and beat the Indianapolis Colts 31-21. Anthony Richardson, I will give credit. A-Rich did look good in that game, but one thing I need to see coached out of him a little bit is the Josh Allen syndrome. He might be getting there. Don't just throw your body into every play, Anthony. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. Please don't. That's all I'm gonna say. Because even Trevor Lawrence after the game, he went up to him. It's hey, protect yourself. It's yeah, you gotta protect yourself, man. You gotta do what you can.
I'd be taking those hits late in the game.
Exactly. To say the very least. I think he did get dinged up a little bit, if I'm not mistaken. So
he got a knee injury. People were worried about him.
Yeah.
But he's expected to play this week. As far as I.
Yeah, same. From as far as I've seen update wise, he is. I will actually, before we get to the pick challenge, I only have one post, and it's not every single name, but there are a good chunk of notable names that will be missing, that are confirmed to already be missing their week 2 games. I will state those names before we get to the pick challenge. To be fair to the boys, I mean, will Rick be on air by then? Who knows? But we'll figure it out. Let's get to the afternoon set of games that was week 1. Justin, here really quick. Raiders Broncos 17-16 win for the Raiders. Denver. this game was for you, and you still screwed it up, to say the very least. It was the Packers-Bears game, which we kind of skipped ahead with. We talked about, I think, majority of it. Eagles-Patriots, it was a closer game than I think we all expected it to be. It was Justin's 4-point game as well. Not sure how much you were sweating a little bit there at the end, Justin, but the Eagles were able to pull out the win through a lot of gritty determination and, well, as we expected, the weakness of the Patriots to be stopping Mac Jones, which, oh, look, is Bill O'Brien better than Matt Patricia and Joe Judge together? Yes. Does that mean that the Patriots offense is going to be leaps and bounds better than what it was last season? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends. So.
I hope not.
Well, I was gonna say, as a Jets fan, you definitely hope not. But there was that game. I will say this, and I forget if it was you or Rick that commented it when we were like reacting to these games. Is that Christian Gonzalez? He's already looking like a good pick, man. That kid is good. That kid is good, man. It was just, how do we let Bill Belichick get another number one caliber corner over there? Like, we just keep letting it happen. When do we learn? When will we learn? We won't, will we?
I don't want to talk about it.
Dude, that's
just
fair.
Be bad. Just be worse.
I'm right with you there. So the Eagles-Patriots game was close. We already talked about Packers-Bears, Raiders-Broncos. I think we'll all agree to not touch that with a 10-foot pole. Let's talk about the two games in the 4 o'clock hour that we will briefly mention here. A disappointment on one end, and, well, there was also disappointment in this game, but it was way more high-scoring. Dolphins-Chargers, 36-34 shootout between those teams. Tyreek Hill, over 200-plus yards. Tua, 450-plus yards in this game. What did he finish with? Was it 466 was the final number, I think?
466.
Just a phenomenal game from him, to say the very least. Straight up outgunned Justin Herbert for his first career victory against Justin Herbert in this one. Despite the fact that the LA Chargers yet again had a chance to win this game, but ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't think the Chargers could find a new way to lose a game, I present to you LAC. Yeah, it was not good, to say the very least. And the other game as well that broke my heart absolutely. Rams beat the Seahawks 30-13. It was just a bad week. The Ring of Honor candidates, they have bad weeks. The Seahawks will totally bounce back. But Justin, your thoughts on each of these two games here? The shootout that happened in LA that ended with a Miami win, which is a big 1-0 win, especially with what happened around that division in week 1. And then the Rams getting a surprise, we could say, a victory over the Seattle Seahawks in the opening week.
Well, I thought that I'm not so surprised that they won. I'm more surprised that they won the way they did, and that is in dominant fashion. I mean, it really didn't ever seem like it was close. The Seahawks could not stop Puka Nacua. They could not stop what's the running back's name?
Oh, the running. I thought you were going to mention Tutu Atwell. He had over 100 yards as well.
Yeah, he had a good game as well.
I got you. Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame.
Kyron Williams. I wanted to say Kyron Ren, which is like Star Wars reference. It's Kylo Ren. But anyways, he played fantastic for them, and the Seahawks really couldn't get much going. I mean, DK Metcalf had a decent game, but other than that, they really had him covered up, which is interesting for a team that traded away their number one cornerback. They really seemed to have something there in their secondary. Aaron Donald played fantastic, as he is 1-2. He was all over Geno Smith, which obviously will help any defense. I was really shocked at the outcome of that game. I'm not as shocked with the Miami Chargers game. I picked Miami to win that game. It's the exact shootout that we thought we would see. I was hoping to see a little bit more of the rookie, Quentin Johnston, who I thought was going to have an excellent career coming out. But, Mike Williams, and he only played when Mike Williams was out for that short period when he had the back injury. So, it was a good game. It was very entertaining to watch. They were back and forth. And how about the first place AFC West Las Vegas Raiders, the only team with a win in that division?
What a world we're living in, where Jimmy G, is he going to luck his way into yet another playoff appearance in a West Division? I mean, probably not, because he wasn't necessarily that impressive.
All the dude does is win.
He really does. He really does. Now,
although I will say, Jacoby Myers, who had an excellent game for them, is out this week.
Yeah, so his weapon of familiarity is not there. It's so tragic that Jacoby Myers isn't there this week. Now, Justin, he has to throw the ball to Devontae Adams.
My fantasy team is just going to be so sad about that.
Man, like
all the I have him in.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine if you're Josh McDaniels and Jimmy Garoppolo? It's like, oh, Jacoby can't play this week. All right. I mean, we do it. We have Devontae. We have Josh Jacobs. I mean, obviously, I know I'm joking here, but like, you know.
No, but here's the thing about that game, is that it's in Buffalo,
right?
An angry Buffalo.
Yeah.
Buffalo just came off of 4 turnovers.
They're gonna get smoked. They're gonna get slaughtered.
All I'm saying is, I don't know how easily they're gonna be able to find Adams. I mean, Zach Wilson was able to find Garrett Wilson last week, even if it was just for 1 touchdown.
It was a good touchdown.
Yeah, it was a great touchdown. It was a fantastic catch by Garrett Wilson. Not a great throw, but we don't have to talk about that. Either way, if they're scoring, it might be some garbage time. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, most likely to say the very least. Yeah, it is quite the week 2 matchup that the Raiders will be having. But of course, it's not on to week 2 yet. We're still talking about week 1. I think for the most part, we've gone through everything. Like you mentioned, For me, it was disappointing the way the Seahawks played as a team that I personally like. I think a lot of people have expectations of. As we know, Rick picked them to win the division this year, and I picked them to make the NFC Championship game out of a wild card. So them's the breaks. But I think they will be able to get past it. I think it was just one of those like we were kind of talking about this. Was it last week or maybe it was the week before? Where it feels like in week 1, there's always at least 1 to 2 results that surprise you. Always. Because of the and I think that's going to be the result. And I think the Seattle team, I think they needed that kind of wake up to reality of, I'm sure this team is confident in itself, but they needed to quickly. I think maybe this could be a good thing for them, where they quickly realize, like this isn't going to be easy. There's a reason why the really good teams win games like they do, like San Fran and Philly winning their games. They're still the class of this conference, and you have a team like the Seattle Seahawks, who a lot of people think is in that tier like below them. So a lot of people will just have tier 1 in the NFC, 49ers, Eagles only. And then there's tier 2, who's in tier 2. The Seahawks, I think we all agree, should be in tier 2. This is, I think this is a result that needs to, it could help that locker room realize that step they got to take to fully solidify themselves. So I think it could be a good thing for them maybe, but we will see what happens. And I will say this about Chargers Dolphins. Completely disappointed in the Chargers. I know they put up 34 points, and you would think to yourself, how could you be disappointed in a team that put up 34 points? But in the same while, that defense, look, I know Tyreek Hill's amazing. I understand that fully. But that defense is really not proving what it was meant to be. And again, I know it's a game, but J.C. Jackson, man, a lot of people thought that you were going to be the difference for this team. You missed half of last season. This was still a team that made the playoffs. And maybe if their number 1 corner had been fully healthy, they would have been better last year. And he got slaughtered by Tyreek Hill. And I know you're going to say it's Tyreek Hill, but you were paid to be a number 1 corner. And Jair Alexander, Jalen Ramsey, Sauce, they could hold their own against a Tyreek Hill.
Listen, Sauce didn't have the best game against Stephon Diggs. He did okay.
Right. No, I understand, but
on both sides of the field, because the Jets don't travel. But Sauce didn't have a great game against the top receiver this week. It happens to the best of us. I will say this: when they signed J.C. Jackson, what did I say?
Well, I feel like you said a lot.
How many of those cornerbacks on second contracts on a new team work out?
Well, especially the New England ones.
I can only think of really one, and it was more of a trade, really, and that's Jalen Ramsey. But a lot of times when you see these cornerbacks switch teams and they sign their big contract and they go somewhere else, they're not as good. And I don't know what it is.
Well, I could think of a second one, Stephon Gilmore with the Patriots. He did become Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
But I get what you mean. It's a very small sample size.
It's rare.
Yeah.
So it's 2 guys. There's tons of guys that get second contracts. If you are a superstar corner and you're signing a second contract, it is rare for you to continue that success. The NFL stands for not for long.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. Although I will say this, just overall, Chargers defense, get it together. Because the last 3 games...
that defense, they should be so much better.
Because listen to this, Justin. The last 3 games for the Chargers offense, they've scored 92 points in their last 3 games played. They're 0-3 in those games.
How many points did you give up? 94 points. 96 points.
Yeah. They gave up 31 to the Broncos last season in the season finale, 31 to the Jaguars in the playoff game, and then 36 to the Dolphins. So that's, by my mental mark scheme,
That's 98.
Yeah. So ultimately, LA, get it together, because Brendan Staley, do better. To say this. I'm not going to say jobs are on the line, but I'm just saying. All right. I think that wraps up our analysis there. And speaking of teams in the second tier of the NFC, let's talk about Sunday Night Football real quick before we get to Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys won 40-0 against the New York Giants. Justin, this is my analysis on this game, and it's fully based off of a stat that I'm sure you've probably heard of at this point in the week. But it was something along the lines of, so the Cowboys shut out the Giants 40-0. They beat them in the sack difference 7-0. They beat them in the turnover difference 3-0. They returned a pick six, and they returned a blocked field goal for a touchdown. That has never happened to one team in the same season. That happened to the Giants in one game. I'm not going to joke and say the season's over, but I will say this. I think my Daniel Jones is Blake Bortles 2.0 take is looking really good right now. Just saying.
Let's. So here's the thing. The pick six was tough. The blocked punt for a touchdown, again, rough. If they mitigate those turnovers and they slow it down a little bit, and they maybe, even if they don't score at the end of that opening drive where they drove all the way down the field, they ran the ball left, they ran the ball right, blah, blah, blah. Without those two touchdowns, that's a 13-point game going into halftime. It is a different world that we live in. You can't rely on freak plays like that to win games sustainably. Now, that being said, the Cowboys did play an excellent game. Their offense was tight. They didn't really need to do much to win, but they didn't have to make mistakes. They played from the lead the whole time, and they played well. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. But if you think that Daniel Jones wasn't going to throw a single pick this year, you were wrong. Thought they were never going to turn the ball over, you were wrong. It was unfortunate that it happened all at once in a rainy day on opening night, Sunday Night Football in front of the nation. It was a tough game. I get it. And really, you really should have been in the end zone at least once, especially in a blowout when the Cowboys are playing their backups. I get that. But I'm not looking at this as an end of the world thing for the Giants. I'm not. They are still a tough team. They should have a bounce back game this week in Arizona. They're going to have a rough one next week, Thursday Night Football against the Niners. But this week, they should be okay. I could see them being 1-2 in the next 3 weeks. And from then on, they should start to play some real football. As long as they be competitive. You can't have this happen again. If this happens again, you're having an issue. And I'm not even talking about Thursday night. I'm talking about after week 3. They're not ready. Like I said before, they may have had the best offseason they could have had. There wasn't that much out there in terms of free agency.
Yeah.
Draft-wise, there's some guys out there, but there's not a ton of draft classes where you're going to turn around and you're going to be a world difference team the next year based on your draft class alone. It doesn't happen. They got some depth. They got a little faster. There's still a lot to build here, and this is only year 2 of a new regime in New York for the Giants. They should be not happy, but they should not be selling by any means.
Right.
Like I said, if they make the playoffs this year, I'm not even saying a win. If they make the playoffs this year, that's a winning season for them. Then the next year, when there's all these free agents and there's all these, they have more draft picks and stuff like that, that's when I'm saying, all right, this is the year you need to show real improvement.
Yeah. Although, I will say this, it is year 2 of the Brian Daboll regime. 100%.
Yeah.
But it is year 1 of a 4-year, $160 million contract to Daniel Jones. And I believe in Brian Daboll as a coach.
Got a pay
but like I said, I had one problem with the Giants offseason the entire time. I had one problem. It was the quarterback that they paid the money to. And I'm just saying, after week 1, I didn't say my thoughts about the Giants as a whole were wrong. I just said my thoughts about the quarterback were right.
Look, again, and I don't expect Daniel Jones to play like that all season. And look, Daboll has proven to be that quarterback whisperer kind of guy. It happens. It happens to the best of it. It really does. I mean, teams get blown out sometimes. No matter what you do, sometimes a team just has your number. You know what I mean? I mean, the Jets blew out. I remember Sam Darnold's first game. Threw a pick six, and then they blew out Detroit. They absolutely murdered them. And everyone said, wow, the Jets are going to be really good. Well, it turns out the Jets were kind of crap that season. They didn't play that well. It was the beginning of the end for them, for Todd Bowles there. And it happened. It is what it is. They I think it was really the only points that Detroit scored that day was the pick six on the first play of the game.
Probably.
And then they won like 42 to 7. That was it.
What a game.
Yeah.
What a game. Well, I will say this about the Giants. You mentioned that they could be 1-2 after week 3, hypothetically. And let's say that does come to pass.
What I expect.
Week 4 at home, yeah, good against the Seahawks. We'll see what Seattle is by then. Who knows? Week 5 against the Dolphins. Week 6 against the Bills. It's going to be a tough 3 games after that week 3.
Well, look, like I said, it's a tough. They've had a really tough opening to the schedule. It lightens up later in the season, but for a team that came third place in their division last year, they have a tough schedule.
Yeah, Act 1 of the season will be difficult for New York. We'll see if Act 2 is where they take that step. Yeah, for certain. Speaking of a difficult first act, oh boy. I haven't seen something that ironic and that disastrous since a Shakespearean play that I had to read back in high school, which I think we all had to read at least one Shakespearean play when we were in high school. Why? I don't know, but them's the New York State standards of education in English, apparently. The New York Jets did defeat the Buffalo Bills 22-16, ladies and gentlemen. Further proving my point that, yet again, the Buffalo Bills, sometimes they just don't have it in them. No, in all seriousness. Tough loss to say the very least. Josh Allen, when he learns not to throw it to Jordan Whitehead, will be better. But that is not the storyline out of this game, let's be honest here. 4th play in the game. After the man came out there, he had the flag with him. It was true. It was literally like a movie. This was the beginning of the Jets Super Bowl, and considering I'm doing a show with 2 people who predicted the Jets Super Bowl win, this was the beginning of the Jets Super Bowl video at the end of the season when you guys win. And it's the opening shot is Aaron Rodgers running down the field, opening night with the flag. The brightest hope that the New York Jets have had in over a decade for football. 4th play of the drive, drops back. Dwayne Brown, old man Dwayne Brown, gets just, I don't even know what the proper word would be, killed at the line of scrimmage by Leonard Floyd. Floyd gets Rodgers, gets him, sacks him, and then I forget if he was able to get up and then went back down. I think that's what happened, but Aaron Rodgers did get up, and then he went back down. And
it wasn't a hard hit.
It wasn't a hard hit, per se. Like, the sack itself was pretty routine, but sometimes it can be the most routine of plays that cause disaster, because as we saw in replays eventually, with the little magnifying glass on it, that Achilles snapped. That was rough, to say the very least, ladies and gentlemen. Aaron Rodgers out for the rest of the season, unfortunately, with a torn Achilles. Look, I'm not a New York sports fan. I'm most certainly not. In fact, with certain New York sports teams, I very much enjoy when they lose, because to me it's comedy. To me it's funny, and I get to see the New York fans suffer, which again, comedy. When it comes to the Jets, I actually don't like seeing the Jets lose. I want the Jets to be good. I have a number of friends who are Jets fans. I've had a number of classmates who are Jets fans. And I do 2 podcasts where, well, the total was 4 Jets fans. I guess now it's technically 3. But I do shows with Jets fans, and I want to see my friends happy. That is one of my goals in life. I wish my friends were to be happy.
For a second, I was like, who quit your podcast? I realized what you were talking about.
But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, this is about as unlucky as you can get. Let's be real here. Aaron Rodgers was going to have a good season. He was. 0 for 1 in the first 4 plays. Like, Aaron Rodgers was going to have a good season with the team.
We don't know that. We'll never know.
Yeah. Well, that's the unfortunate part. But let's speak in hypotheticals here. It was going to be a good season. It was going to be a more competitive team than last year. I think that even without the hypothetical, we know for sure. It was going to be an interesting thing to see this New York Jets team, legitimately the first New York Jets team to have legitimate hope since the last AFC Championship game they made with Mark Sanchez. and in one play, poof, that's all gone. I try to avoid hyperboles when I can. I really do. But I think the saying you won the battle, but you might lose or you've lost the war. I don't know if there's a greater interpretation of that for football or in sports right now than week 1 for the New York Jets for 2023. Now, we need to see the season unfold. Again, a massive victory. Let's get to a little bit of the game itself. Rodgers goes out. Before that, the Jets defense stopped the Buffalo Bills on the first drive. That was phenomenal. At one point, the Bills, they take a lead. I think it was a field goal was the first points on the board for the Bills. Breece Hall has a electric run, to say the very least. Breece Hall showing why he probably could have and would have been Offensive Rookie of the Year had he not gotten injured last season with a season-ending injury. So him and Garrett Wilson did the best they could. But the Jets were unable to finish with a touchdown. They get a field goal. Bills go up by a score. And I think at one point it was 13-3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then just little by little, like the Jets offense, I can't say roars back to life, but shows up. And the big reason for that is the defense. It's stopping Josh Allen. It's him trying to jump in midair and 2 Jets guys hitting him when he was well short of a first down. It's Jordan Whitehead just being in the right place every single time when it came to, 3 interceptions for himself. I would love to see the list of guys in the league right now with 3 interception games because I don't know how big that list is.
Did you see the thing with his contract?
I did not. What was it?
So he had signed an incentive-laden contract that if he had 3 or more interceptions in a season, this season he made $250,000.
Look at that!
Yeah,
he's already reached it. So that game gave Jordan Whitehead 250 extra K. So Josh Allen helped Jordan Whitehead get $250,000 richer. Which if I'm Jordan Whitehead for bleeps and giggles for just the laughs, I would send a postcard. But yeah, he's probably not going to do that. But interceptions on Josh Allen, stopping the Bills' offense. Like you said, there were struggles for Sauce Gardner against Stephon Diggs and for Reed as well, especially in the second half. But the Jets' defense did its job. They limited Josh Allen. They limited Stephon Diggs for the most part, the best they could. They limited the rest of the weapons on that team, really. Dawson Knox didn't do much. Gabe Davis, again, we're waiting on him to have that breakout. He didn't do much. Dalton Kincaid in his first game, I think he was mainly just relegated to being an extra tight end out there in moments. It just didn't really become a weapon that people would have expected from week 1. Again, week 1, give the kid time. I mean, he's the heir apparent from everything I'm seeing in Buffalo, but give the kid time. But the Jets defense did a phenomenal job, and the Jets offense just kept on doing enough. They take the lead off of that out, like you said, Justin. This play needs to stay a top 5 play for the season by the end of the year. You know how the NFL always does? It's like top 100 plays at the end of the year. This play is locked in for the top 5, no matter what.
It was a phenomenal play, man.
Yes, Zach Wilson,
arguably the best catches I've ever seen.
Yes.
I've never to reach across his body like that, across the defender, to knock it up or back rather, for him to catch it in the front corner of the end zone and stay in bounds. That's a hell of a catch, man.
Phenomenal. Like Garrett Wilson didn't have the most stats in that game, but Lord, he had the most impactful play, to say the very least. That tied the game. Moments later, I believe it was Josh Allen fumbling the ball. Jets take the lead. Bills are able to charge down the field. They kick a field goal, tie the game, which hit off the upright and then in. So there was a little bit of fear of oh no, are the Jets going to get that unlucky? At first it was, oh no, are the Bills unlucky? Then it's oh no, are the Jets going to get unlucky and are they going to lose an OT because the Bills were able to win via the kicker doinking it in off the upright. But first drive into OT, the Jets defense, again, staying strong. And a punt return for a touchdown for Xavier Gipson, who anybody that watched Hard Knocks knows the hype, knows the story, him making the team being happy for him. What a way to start the season, to say the very least, if you are the New York Jets. You get the temporary high of it, and then you got to come back down to earth a little bit when it comes to the finality of, now you got to go the whole rest of the season without Aaron Rodgers. So that's my storytelling of the game. Justin, thoughts, emotions, tears, anger, happiness temporarily, followed by realization sinking in. This really is a Shakespearean drama when I'm starting to think about it. The Jets week 1 encapsulated with your emotions. What was it?
Look, as a Jets fan, And anyone that is a really true Jets fan, when they traded for Aaron Rodgers, knowing the roster that they had and the guys they had in place, if the thought didn't cross your mind that Aaron Rodgers would play a handful of plays and get hurt and never play again for the Jets, then you really aren't a true Jets fan. All right. As much as I'm surprised and was in shock and couldn't believe it, it's the Jets. I could believe it a little bit. It's just who they are. No matter what has happened to them, they can never get a fair shot at the quarterback, at having a quarterback. I mean, the same thing happened to them in what, 99, when they went to the AFC Championship game the year before, and then they had Testaverde, and everyone had these high hopes, and Testaverde tripped over the 15-yard line. Nobody around him, tore his ACL, was done for the year. It happens. It happens to them. Am I happy about it? No, of course not. And this was it. This was the year. And now, no matter what happens, anything short of a Super Bowl becomes, well, what if? What if? And we'll never know. And we'll never see it. And all I got to hope for is that he comes back healthy next year and the same thing doesn't happen to him. I hope he comes back healthy. I hope that he's the same player that we thought he was going to be this year. And let's hope that there's some magic left in that arm and hopefully those Achilles. But what if?
What if, to say the very least. It is disappointing, of course, what happened. And again, it's tough because you end up with the win and you get that feel good. You get the punt return. And it's like, can there be a light at the end of this tunnel? Can there be something here? But then, of course, you get the bad news that everyone was fearing. I remember when I first saw it, like, it was being reported towards the end of the game. Like, the game didn't even finish yet when I was seeing, like, initial reports about there's a fear that it could be extremely severe. Because the first thought to everyone's mind was, like, is it just an ankle or a foot? Which just goes to show, ladies and gentlemen,
everyone was hoping.
Sports broadcasting 101. You don't guess what the injury is until you finally hear it. So you get that, then it's the news, then it's just like you have the result and you can be happy about the result, but then you see how Zach Wilson plays just so I'm gonna I don't know how much more we want to do about the game because I think for the most part it's been done to hell and back at this point. Then again, that's what we kind of get for doing a show on Saturdays. Justin, when it comes to the Jets quarterback situation itself, I think for the most part people are going to expect it's Zach Wilson's show for the next couple of weeks. Is there any possibility whatsoever that a trade could happen for the Jets closer to the trade deadline, you think? Again, I know it's early, and we do need to give Zach Wilson time. Is there a chance that there could be... I'm not talking about like a top-tier quarterback. Obviously not. But like a middle-tier quarterback, you think, or no?
Unless they're getting some sort of wild deal, which I don't think is going to happen because any team that's going to trade with them is going to try and extort as much capital from them as possible because of the situation that they're in now. But that being said, I don't see it. There's no amount of capital that's worth giving up for a team like this. You have Aaron Rodgers still under contract. He says he's coming back to play next year. He expects to be back sooner rather than later. I don't know if that's the case, but if that's the situation that you're in, you're not giving up draft capital for a one-year band-aid.
Right.
Just
especially
not.
When you still have your first-round pick.
You're keeping your first-round pick now. You might even have a good pick if the Jets aren't good this year because Zach Wilson's throwing the ball. Look, I want to believe in Zach. I want him to be good. I want more than anything for him to be the future of the New York Jets. But I don't see it. You know, he hasn't shown anything to prove otherwise at this point. I mean, his decision making has been poor, and that's really the only issue. It's not like he's got a lack of physical talent. I mean, the kid is fast. He's evasive in the pocket. He can throw the ball a mile, but he makes poor decisions. I mean, even that throw to Garrett Wilson, that was a touchdown. That Garrett Wilson made an excellent play. That throw was directly at the defender. It was not a good throw. And Garrett Wilson made an amazing catch and an amazing play. And I'm sitting here saying, all right, he got away with it. That's fantastic. But that's not the first ball he threw directly at the defender that game. You know what I mean? I mean, there was a play where he threw an interception in the middle of the field. The Bills defender didn't move the whole play, and he threw it right at him. So, as much as I want Zach Wilson to succeed, I have not seen anything to prove that he is going to be the definitive guy in the future. Now, again, that can change. Aaron Rodgers is still there. He's there to teach him. Hackett is there. Maybe Hackett can teach him, a little bit more. But at this point, Zach Wilson's the guy for this year, and we'll worry about it next year. I don't see them giving up any draft capital.
There it is. Yeah, I'm kind of with you for the most part. It's like you said, it would have to be a mid-level QB, and it would have to be like a mid-round pick going the other way. And
it's just not
right. It we'll ultimately see how this all shakes out, but it is most likely Zach Wilson going in. And hey, maybe Zach Wilson will surprise us all. Again, surprises happen. Maybe Rick's prediction about that final drive of the Super Bowl, maybe, just maybe, it's going to be for the whole season.
Look, how many Super Bowl winning quarterbacks are you think are on the trade block right now? How many quarterbacks do you think are capable of winning a Super Bowl on the trade block right now?
None.
All right, so we'll leave it at that. Let's make our picks. Unless you have something else in between now and then.
Well, just one final brief thing here before we go. We tend to talk about it. Just a quick breakdown of Thursday Night Football here, really quick. It was a rematch of last season between the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles, and it ended up with the same result in terms of who won, but not the scoring margin. Well, it was that way for a little bit. At one point, the Philadelphia Eagles got out to a 27-7 lead in this game, and it was looking pretty good. But the Minnesota Vikings offense, probably the best aspect of this team, started to roar back. It was a Jordan Addison long ball, 62-yarder. KJ Osborne ended up being wide open in the end zone. Basically had his own area code in the dang end zone at that point. A massive breakdown in the Eagles defense that you just don't see often. And then the pressure was on Philly, and they were able to deliver with a DeAndre Swift rushing TD, who had a phenomenal game for himself, by the way. DeAndre Swift did, to take the lead. The Vikings were able to score with I don't know if it was their final possession with the ball, or at least basically their final scoring play. They were able to score with TJ Hawkinson, but they were unable to steal it. Would have been a steal of a victory over the Philadelphia Eagles, to say the very least, about this game. So now we have a 2-game sample with these teams, Justin, the only 2, obviously, so far. Thoughts from the Thursday night game about what it told you about both sides, from the Vikings and from the Eagles side?
So, one thing for the Vikings, which is something I have been saying for a long time, is I don't understand the Dalvin Cook cut. Clearly, it's not working out for them. I mean, Madison's a good guy. He's a good running back. He's not a top guy. And for you to shoot yourself in the foot on offense like that made no sense to me. That being said, the Vikings really, really have to curb their turnovers. They have to protect the ball better. I understand you want to get out there, you want to sling it, you want to do well. How many fumbles did they lose on Thursday night? 4? 3? They had a lot of turnovers, and that's the difference in the game. Again, they had a ton of turnovers last week. They had a ton of turnovers this week, and that's the reason that they're 0-2. The Eagles are winning, but they look human, which is different than they started out last year. And, maybe we're going to see this team come on later in the year. I certainly think it's possible. But there was never a point where, it didn't feel close, but there was also never a point where it didn't feel like the Vikings could come back.
Right.
There was always they're sort of sticking around. They were up, I think the Eagles were up 3 touchdowns at one point, and it was just like, it's not really over yet. There's plenty of time left. So they did end up putting away late. It never really became closer than a touchdown game. But yes, they look human, and I'm curious to see when they play like a real cream of the crop team, maybe in week 3, what we should be expecting.
Right. And again, this is one of those things. You face 2 teams that, well, at least when it comes to New England Patriots, known for having good defense. The Minnesota Vikings, not known for having a good defense, but known for having a good offense. And, it took a little bit of time for that offense to get it going, and they were able to get it going, to say the very least. I think, like you mentioned, is this a game that we could use as one of those chink in the armor kind of deals where the Eagles may not be the overwhelming force that we thought that they would be? That is very much a question to ask. I would also argue is that and maybe this is a learning experience for the Eagles, as we are talking about, what you do in wins and losses, is that they maybe take their gas off the pedal a little bit, potentially. I mean, that KJ Osborne touchdown, again, wide open. Nobody, me and Justin are closer to one another right now in terms of physical distance than any Eagles defender was basically on that KJ Osborne touchdown. I'm pretty sure Justin's in a different state from me right now. it's not good. Not good to say the very least. So a breakdown there. The Jordan Addison touchdown, interesting because it was 62-yarder, but aside from that play from between him and Cousins, he only had 2 other catches in the game for 10 yards. So you mentioned it's like unsustainable ways of winning. It's like Jordan Addison, like guys aren't always going to rip off a 60-yard TD. Like that's not always going to happen for your offense. So do you also look at it from the perspective of if you're the Eagles, you let your foot off the gas pedal and you let the Vikings get too much momentum? Because a similar thing happened last year when it came to the Bills-Vikings game. That was just fully the Minnesota Vikings coming back against the Bills, and it was mistake after mistake after mistake for Buffalo that helped lead to that Minnesota victory for them. What a game that was last season. So I can see it going both ways. I will say, again, I think if you're the Eagles, like you mentioned, Justin, maybe this isn't the same dominating team we think. I mean, their week 3 matchup is against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which TBD on how good of a team Tampa is. And the week after that is the Commanders game, which, I mean, the Commanders, relatively speaking, are competitive. Like, the NFC East tends to be relatively competitive with one another. Well, I say that after week 1 between Giants and Cowboys. So maybe not always the case, but, we'll see that. Is week 5 against the Rams the first test for the Eagles? Is week 6 against the Jets the first test now against the Eagles? Like, I think it's a fair question to ask of when, like, we talk about the Eagles and who's going to test them. When is that first test really going to come up for them? I think is something fair to ask. I don't fully view this as that. I will say this at the end of the day, Olo for Minnesota, 0-2, not a great spot to be in. Obviously, you mentioned earlier, Justin, that Joe Burrow and the Bengals started 0-2 last season, and they made it to the AFC Championship game. Kirk Cousins ain't Joe Burrow. He's not Joe Burrow, and this Minnesota Vikings defense is just, again, like, I will say this. For as much, trash that I give the Vikings offense, and me calling them frauds and all that stuff. And, of course, it was a very mistake-heavy day for them, but they were still able to put up the 28 points. I always said the thing that would fail them this season would be the defense. And I think we've seen in 2 games when they needed stops the most against the Buccaneers, the defense weren't able to stop Tampa Bay fully. And in this game, the defense let the Eagles run up the score enough at the beginning to where it kind of got away from them. So I think ultimately, if you're Minnesota, this is a rough 0-2 start, and it doesn't necessarily get easier. So let's real quick, because I kind of went over the Eagles schedule there briefly. I will say this week, I don't know if it's week 7 or week 8. It would depend on when the bye week is again for Philly. But their 7th game of the season, I'll say, is against the Miami Dolphins. That might be the first test that the Eagles now go through this season in terms of both sides of the ball with that team. I think maybe the Jets defense could definitely challenge them in week 6. I'll definitely give you guys that with how you played this past week for sure.
The Jets have never beaten the Eagles in the history of their franchise. So,
oof. Hey, streaks are meant to be broken, but we have that. Let's go over the Chargers here really quick, Justin. Let's just go over about the halfway point of the season for. Did I say the Chargers? My bad. Vikings. Well, makes sense I said Chargers because the Chargers are actually the next game for Minnesota. So it will be in Minnesota. It'll be Chargers-Vikings. After that, they go to Carolina for Vikings-Panthers. Then they have a home game against the Kansas City Chiefs. They are at Chicago midway through the month of October. And then they have, like I said, it'll go to, let's say, the end of October for them. It is a home game against the 49ers and an away game against the Green Bay Packers. So that is 6 games right there. If you're Minnesota and you have to save the season, like, what do you think that? What, maybe like 3-3 in this stretch? Maybe 4-2. They got to eke out one of those surprise wins. What do you think?
They probably gotta win one game that they're not favored in. Although they might, it's in Green Bay. They'll definitely have to win the 2 in-division games, and that's in Chicago and in Green Bay. I would say they have to win against Carolina too. But even still, even if they go 3-3, that's a 3-5 record in their first 8 games.
Yeah,
not ideal.
Right.
You would like to think that maybe they could sneak one of these games out. Maybe a game against a team like the Chargers, who have had their struggles stopping teams with high offensive firepower. We'll see. But they really need to, I think, steal at least one more.
Right. It most certainly is, and it might be that Chargers game, like you mentioned, where that Chargers game would get them to 4-2 if they are able to do what they're supposed to. But again, let's have this conversation. They were supposed to win the Tampa Bay game on paper, and they lost it. And I look at it, the Chargers game is going to be up in the air. We need to see how the Chargers play in week 2, of course, before we give our full thoughts about them. The Carolina Panthers, it was a tough week 1 for them. It'll be an interesting week 2 matchup between them and the Saints here as one of the primetime games to end off the week. I think that, again, we'll see how this young Carolina Panthers team is able to do. That game against the Chiefs, if this is a Kansas City Chiefs team that'll be week 4 into the season. You're saying Travis Kelce and Chris Jones now have 2 games under their belt to kind of get back into rhythm with everything. That might not be the cleanest game for Minnesota, to say the very least. And then you have the Bears game, like you said.
Coming off a week 4 loss, hopefully.
Well, very true. And then you have that game against Chicago in Chicago, at home against San Fran, and then in Green Bay. It's interesting, Justin, because you look at it, I would say of these next 6 games, it's evenly split between home and away. They have the home games against the teams that they like. It'd be more beneficial for them to have home games against. But the away games that they have, it's like you said, 2 in division. So like Chicago and Green Bay should, in theory, show up for both those games in terms of the crowd. And then you ultimately have the game against the Carolina Panthers, where, I don't think Carolina is necessarily a bad home crowd, to say the very least. Hey, the Podfather's here.
Can I reach back? I'm trying to see if I can reach back. I have paint in my car right now, all right?
Really?
I'm painting a front door.
Huh.
Along with putting in the bedroom set and putting in a nursery tomorrow. And the Casa del Podfather is really coming along. So should be fully in the studio by next Christmas.
There we
go. At this rate.
Next Christmas. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to move on, the Podfather has graced us with his presence. You know what that means. It means that we have to do our thing on this show, and that is the hashtag SAOC pick challenge les champions. I had that last part at the end. And as the screen temporarily goes black on Rickson. There we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, the way the Sports Agents of Chaos pick challenge works for us, we go between the 3 of us in a snake order format to decide for 4 picks between us, from a 4-point pick to a 1-point pick, graded on relative confidence that we have in the games that we are picking. We must all pick at least 1 upset game, and the upset is based off of the lines that we are getting via the ESPN app that we're seeing, which, when it comes to what the lines ESPN has, Justin, they are via the friends at
Caesar Sportsbook.
There's my boy. So ultimately speaking, that's how it goes. I think I hit on all the rules, basically, for the most part, which means the only thing left to do, well, kind of recap how last week went, because people must know the order, and then pick the games. So, Podfather, what are we doing?
Congratulations, Justin. Week 1 champion, 7 points. Very well done. I will say I'm very proud of all 3 of us for achieving the goal that I had set out last week, which was to just do better than last year at week 1. So Justin had 7, Jurg had 6, and I had 5. And we had our first 0-point week from our new mascot. Billy Shakes went 0 for 3 in the week. Although, I will say, if you recall, he tried to curb favor with Justin by not picking the Jets for his 1-point pick. So I think Justin likes the Pirate just a little bit more than the other thing we had last year, which I'm not inclined to discuss at this point in time. So,
well, the Pirate has also not contributed in any way in the trivia so far, so that's probably another reason why Justin likes Billy Shakes a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's the right way to do it here. So I guess we're going snake order format, and I guess we're going from least points to most points again, like we did last year.
Yeah.
Which is glory, hallelujah to me. And by the way, again, Shana Tova to you, Justin. I know it's Rush, not Rush Week in the fraternity stories, but Rosh Hashanah. So Happy New Year to you, obviously. Yeah. I did happen to catch one thing you were talking about before I went and bought more paint. And that was the Sunday night game. I do believe that was an aberration as well. And I will say that my 4-point pick this week is the New York Giants over the Arizona Cardinals for that one reason alone. Look, the Cardinals are not a good team. We know this for a fact. I think the Commanders game was a bit of a reach for them. But I believe the Giants can right the ship, and they need to, because if they don't and they lose this game to Arizona, there's a possibility they can start off 0-6 or 0-7. So the Giants, this is an absolute must-win, do or die for Daniel Jones in the desert of Phoenix, Why is it a desert in Phoenix? I have no idea. But regardless, I will take the Giants for my 4-point pick over the Cardinals.
All right, quick, efficient, and to the point. I will continue the proceedings here, and I won't waste any time. I'm very happy that this game is still on the board because me and Justin were just actually talking about this scenario that is running into this. The team on one side, the visiting team, is missing their 2-touchdown receiver from last week, and the other team had an absolutely embarrassing loss in week 1. So give me the Buffalo Bills over the Las Vegas Raiders for my first pick of this. Very angry Buffalo Bills at home. If this was in Vegas, I think it would be more interesting, but it's at home in Buffalo. It's there's going to be some red along with the black and silver there because blood might be shed.
Yeah, that's a fair pick too, and it was a game that I was looking at too heavily. But honestly, Josh Allen's game on Monday night concerned me greatly. I know the Raiders don't have as good of a defense, but it was very concerning to watch your Madden cover athlete have a cursed week 1, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I'm absolutely with you. And I will say this. If the Bills lose this game, I will not be picking them for the rest of the season. Trust me on that.
That's how you do it.
All right. Now, here's the thing, guys. I don't see any of the spreads because I don't have my usual setup. I can see the schedule, but I don't know who's favored.
I can give you the spreads. I have them all. So
I also know, based upon my picks for what I pick for upsets and my regular, who's not an upset. So I can tell you that straight out.
Okay, but for now, I don't need that because I'm obviously not going to pick an upset right from the get-go.
You're picking a tie because Houston versus Indianapolis on the board again, right? I'm here for 5 minutes, and what do? Stir chaos.
No. I am debating between a couple of games, and I think I'm going to go. See, that's a tough one too. I think the closest thing to a sure thing is going to be the Chargers over Tennessee. I know it's in Tennessee, but I don't think that the Titans have the firepower to keep up with a team like the Chargers, and I also don't think that they have the defense to stop a quarterback like Justin Herbert. So I'm going to go with the Chargers as my 4-point pick. As my 3-point pick, I think I'm going to go San Francisco over Los Angeles. They're just such a good defense. They're not going to have the same freedom that they did playing against Seattle. And that being said, good luck trying to stop that offense as well. So I'm gonna choose San Francisco there.
Let me tell you something. As disappointing through the first 2 weeks as Philadelphia might have been, San Francisco is scary, man. They are a scary team.
Yep.
So I don't blame you for taking that as your 3-pointer. Absolutely.
And Brock Purdy, man, there were a lot of questions about him after the injury. He didn't look too bad in that first game, to say the very least.
Oh, he looked good, man. Yeah. He looked good.
He looked real good. By the way, actually, I referenced it earlier. It escaped my mind, but let me say it right now as we finish off the thing. I don't think this will affect either Justin's picks in any way, but this is a post that I saved. It is players who are at this point definitively ruled out for playing this Sunday. So the likes of the players that are ruled out for playing this Sunday include, well, it's Sunday and Monday as well. You know, there's Monday Night Football. So the players that are not playing this weekend include Marlon Humphrey and Tyler Linderbaum and Ronnie Stanley and Marcus Williams of the Baltimore Ravens. Ouch. Carlton Davis and Kalijah Kancey of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jamal Adams, Charles Cross of the Seattle Seahawks. Is Abe Lucas a Seattle Seahawk?
Yes, he is.
So Abe Lucas as well. Jalen Petrie is out. Jimmy Ward is out. Chandler Jones and Jacoby Meyer are out. Christian Fulton and Amani Hooker are out. Frank Clark is out. And Greg Dulcich is out. So a good chunk of guys there that are out. I think even maybe a couple more names that are not listed there that could be missing time. So just a key thing to keep in mind. I will personally be trying to find a list like that if possible as we go into these challenges on a week-by-week basis. Will I succeed in that? Probably not, but I'll try.
Well, you know who else is out this week coming up? Colin Kaepernick.
No.
Certainly not playing. Austin Eckler is also a question
Yes.
mark, which made me realize, now after I already made my 4-point pick. But it's fine. We'll just keep
I know, but you know what? Honestly, though, the Chargers are still a good pick because, I mean, that offense has to get in its groove. And on the Tennessee defense, especially if Fulton's not there, I think that's a big win for Herbert and the Chargers wide receiver core. So,
yeah.
All right. This one is going to be a little bit of a tough one for me Because I will say this, now that we have played a game, we have like lines that are a little bit more realistic to what we've seen in week one, which of course will change week by week.
Yeah.
See, there's a game here that I want to pick. I kind of feel bad if I pick it, but at the same time, I'm like, ooh, that is a very tantalizing team to go with because they look so good in week one. And I'm going to be real here. The team they're facing just does not have their quarterback anymore. I'm sorry, Justin, but my 3-point pick, I got to go with the Cowboys over the Jets. It's in Dallas, so.
Go for it.
Yeah. Listen, that you're riding the hot hand with the defense against Zach Wilson on offense. And, I have a feeling this game could be very low scoring through like the first half because both defenses are just really good. But yeah, Dallas has a lot. Dallas is a better person throwing the ball or handing the ball off than the Jets do at this point. And so that makes sense to pick that game.
I will say that it is going to be interesting to see. Like, I think 8.5 might be a little bit too much of a spread right now. I do understand that Aaron Rodgers is out, but like Justin mentioned, and I will say this, for me, harping on the Giants for that first game, I know like the Cowboys are not going to have another game this season where they both block a field goal for a TD and have a pick six in the same game. If they do, I'm sorry.
Right.
But I don't expect that to happen. And just Dak was not that impressive in that first game, man. Like, and maybe at the end of the day, it just comes down to the fact that he didn't have to be. Like, it could just be that. We'll see. But this is, I think, an offensive test for the Cowboys, to say the very least. This is a good Jets defense. And like you said, Rick, I think the reason if Dallas does win this game is because of their defense. Like, Micah Parsons, Trevon Diggs, those guys look good.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I think you could also play the factor of the elements into the condition because that Sunday night game was played in an absolute disaster of a weather condition. So, maybe that had a problem with Dak, throwing the ball too. So, yeah, I think that's a good 3-point pick. So I have back-to-back 3 and 2 here. So this is where things get interesting because there are 4 games that I have in my mind that I can pick at 3 and at 2. The problem is that I have to take an upset, obviously, at some point. And when I was going through the lines today, they must have shifted around because for my personal picks that I make, I only had 3 upsets this week. One of them was the Jets because, the line changed after Rodgers got hurt, obviously. But the Jets were a favorite in that game.
Right.
Going into it, I think, until Rodgers got hurt. So then I have 2 others, and I'm not confident in either one of them. So let me table that. I'll make my upset my 2-pointer this week. So now I'm torn between 2. Do I go with a team that is playing an offense that had a really good game last week, but it was 1 game and it's sample size?
I know what game you're thinking about.
Or do I go with a team that had a really good offense last week, but is going into a trap game that could be tantalizing for an upset on the defensive side of the ball?
I definitely know what games you're talking about.
So that's the question mark that I have in my head here. One of them is a closer game on the spread. One of them is, I think, about 1.5 for a favorite in this game. And it's just my thing is that the jury is out, but as a Bears fan, I learned the hard way about picking against Green Bay last week because it didn't work out in my favor. And so as much as I love Atlanta in this game, I'm going to pass on them. And I'm going to take the Dolphins over the Patriots at 3 points on Sunday night.
There we go.
Because I think, now look, here's the risk with that. Tua could have a bad game.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, he had 450 plus passing yards last week. So against the Patriots defense, I don't expect it to be that big. But the favorable thing for him is that the weather's going to be pretty good in Boston. It won't be as windy as it is today up there because the hurricane's blowing through right now. So it won't be as windy. So Tua can still air the ball out pretty good. And Tyreek Hill's going to go wherever the ball goes.
Right.
So I think that's a better matchup. New England's defense, they played okay, but Philadelphia was also very slow out of the blocks last week. So I think that's a better game. I'll take Miami over New England at 3. Now we come to 2 points. And so once again, we're at a game where one team played decently, but should have played better against the team that we know is going to suck because it's an upset, versus a team that last week played absolutely horribly. But you're thinking maybe it'll bounce back against a team that might have played a little bit better than they should have. So that's kind of where I'm sitting. The other question is, do I ride with the team that I'm high on now or the team that I was high on last year? And that's kind of where I have my difficulties here. I am going to stick my neck out, and I'm going to say that last week was an aberration. I will take Pittsburgh my 2-point upset over Cleveland on Monday Night Football. The other game I was thinking about was Washington over Denver, but I don't know if I trust Sam Howell enough to get 20 points over this Denver defense, because that's all you need to win the game, because Russell Wilson can't throw the ball for life. But I don't trust Washington enough to get as much offense there. So I will take Pittsburgh at 2 points. It's a risky play, but I think that Kenny Pickett will have a bounce-back game. I'm not confident in it whatsoever, though. So if I lose, so be it.
All right, there we go. All right, interesting. I will say this in regards to, well, two things. First, your Dolphins pick. My friend told me about this earlier this week. I didn't even realize it. Tua's actually undefeated against Bill Belichick so far in his career.
Right, but the minute you throw that out there, something's going to happen.
Very true. So something will break this season potentially, but it is worth noting. And then the second game you go with there, I will say this: a lot of the closer lines this week, it's like you could really see going other way. Because I'm not gonna. This is not my pick, but I am saying a tempting upset pick for me is the Bears over the Buccaneers, actually.
Right.
Because I think you'll get a better chance, because this Tampa team, they're going to miss a couple guys now, as I said in that injury list. The Bears do need to perform better, and there's only so much that Baker Mayfield can do. So it is an upset pick to consider. And now Justin and I are in the situation again via last week that we have to go with our upset picks. Now, I'm not going to let Justin pick my upset pick. I ain't doing that. So let's just put that out the way here.
Oh, come on. You got to be fair. You helped him in the first place. Maybe he can help you.
I don't. He did that to himself. He did that to himself. He cost himself the 2 points. I got to do him a favor. So if I'm going to go with an upset here, there are a couple very interesting upsets here. The problem for some of these upsets is the fact that I have to go against A, my thoughts about these teams so far this season, and B, other picks I've made on other podcasts. So this is a real tough one for me. But I think with this one, I will not have to go against the pick, because I give at least 2 to 3 weeks before I start to change my thoughts about a team. And this team had a very surprising week 1. I think they're going to bounce back in week 2. Give me for my 2-point upset, the Seattle Seahawks in Detroit, defeating the Detroit Lions. It is presently, Detroit is a minus 4.5 point favorite, which I think is fair, considering how both teams played last week. But I think this was a game that was very high scoring last season. And I think it will be very interesting to see how far both these teams have come from that high scoring battle last season.
You do realize, by the way, that if the Seahawks start 0-2, I'm going to DM Geno Smith and tell him you picked him twice and you lost. So I'm going to have him write receipt to you saying, stop picking my games, you noob.
Leave him alone.
Never.
All right. So can you guys tell me who are the favored teams on the teams that are left?
So Kansas City's favored over Jacksonville.
Yep.
Cincinnati is favored over Baltimore. Not by a lot. Houston's favored over Indy.
By 1 point.
By 1 point.
Atlanta is favored over Green Bay by 1.5.
And then New Orleans is favored over Carolina by, I think, 3.5. Right?
It's only showing 3 for me, but 3.5. They're the favorite no matter what.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
And did you didn't pick Denver, the Denver game, right, Rick?
I did not pick the Denver game, no. So, I doubt Justin will, so I didn't mention it.
Fair enough, but I think, just to be fair, the Broncos are favored by minus 3.5 over the Commanders.
Right.
Well, you're right. I'm not picking that game. What I'm gonna pick 2 upsets right now.
Ooh.
And
as a prerogative.
I'm gonna go with Baltimore over Cincinnati.
Okay.
As my 2-point pick, and Indianapolis over Houston as my 1-point pick.
Attaboy.
Right. Okay.
Not bad.
I don't quite understand the logic of why Cincinnati is still. I mean, I understand that Baltimore's lost 4 players, but Joe Burrow did not look good in week 1 for Cincinnati. I can see this being a 12-9 game. Honestly.
Yeah, their defense isn't nearly as good as the Browns are, and now they're at home. They're not going to be this team forever, but this is how they start the season for whatever reason, and that's why I'm taking the Ravens. They're a slow start team, and Joe Burrow missed the whole offseason now. Maybe they start even slower this year. I just don't see it this week for them.
That's fair. All right. And also the Colts-Texans was definitely a game that I was considering for myself as well, Justin, because that, like, it's always Colts and Texans is the interesting one for us. And, you know, a 1-point difference, 2 rookie quarterbacks starting in the AFC South, very intriguing game to say the very least between those two clubs. Interesting that Houston's the favorite as well. Anyways, moving on. My 1-point pick. So a good amount of games that I would have been interested in have been taken because ironically enough, both of Justin's picks I was considering for my 1-point game as well. So if I had to pick one more game, well, I have to pick one more game, not if. Got to pick one more game here. You know what? Because again, it's all about for me. That's the thing. At the end of the day, I want to keep it consistent, right? I want to stay consistent. I want to stay true to my picks. I want to be as much a man of my word as possible. And despite the fact that I did not pick this team to win the division in the preseason, I do like how they're looking right now. And I'm expecting the other team to not be as good at some point. I think that might be the case here. Give me the Falcons over the Packers for my 1-point pick. I said it, and again, maybe next show when we're all back in regular conditions, I'd hope. Maybe next week will be the week to start talking about the Atlanta Falcons, where if Arthur Smith can figure it out and have a 3-headed running back dragon between Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and as Justin noted earlier in the program, Cordero Patterson, something's happening in Atlanta, man. So I'm going to go with the Falcons there because I think it was a severe underperformance of the Bears defense against the Packers. I don't know if that's going to happen again, especially if Aaron Jones isn't necessarily 100% going into the game. I know it may have been just a little tweak of the hamstring, but still tough.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So I think that I have an easy 1-point pick. I think for myself, I'll take the Saints over the Panthers for 1 point. Bryce Young could be good, but this Saints defense has been pretty solid, I think, and so. Geez, Derek Carr will be 2-0 in the division. God help us all.
Oh, no.
So those are the games. So remind me again, just for because I did a whole wheel like a while ago. So the Pirate, his games are going to be Kansas City, Jacksonville.
Yes.
Washington, Denver.
Yes.
And what other one? Tampa Bay, Chicago.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Okay. He hates all of us because he had 0 points. So he goes Denver 3 for 3 points over Washington. He will take the upset of Jacksonville over the Chiefs at 2. And then because he really hates me, he'll go Tampa Bay over Chicago for 1. So there you go.
All right. There's that. So that completes the Week 2 edition of the hashtag SAOC Pick Challenge of Les Champions. I should probably add that to the name just for the hell of it. But ultimately, it is fun times to say the very least. All our picks are locked in. It's going to be a fun week to see here. How good will we do? How poorly will we do? When will one of us have a bad week? Because it was a pretty decent week all around so far. I think the interesting thing will be when will one of us have a bad week? Because we didn't mention it before. I believe we haven't talked about it in depth, but there is the potential this season where in the case that somebody goes 0-4 in a given week, there will be a punishment. And that will be fun to say the very least on what those punishments could potentially be. Yeah. Oh, how fun it'll be. Within reason, of course, with the punishments, because, there's only so much we can all do for that. So, but fun times, to say the very least, on the show. All right. That completes the pick challenge. Are we done yet, though? I don't know, Rick. Do we have a rant podium this week?
I can do a very basic one, yeah. Because I have a very basic couple of rants that I want to get off my chest while I'm driving. Because, I feel like it's better to rant while I'm driving at some point,
Let's do it.
So, okay. So, my number 3 rant is going to go to Google Chrome and Opera and Brave and all these other internet service providers that are mobile, because none of y'all let me log into StreamYard to access the stream, so I had to delay for 5 minutes while the 2 guys were talking about the Vikings and the Eagles thing they love to do so freaking much. Is talking about the Vikings and the Eagles for 5 extra minutes. Like, come on now. Work with StreamYard. Work with me. We're the stars, damn it. Work with us. Regardless, I pull into a cul-de-sac for no apparent reason. Number 2, Justin Bieber is going to go on my list this week, but it's not a while ago that I kind of held away in reserve, but I want to get back to a bit, and that is that he and his wife went out to dinner recently, and Haley Bieber decided to wear this lovely, gorgeous red dress, looked absolutely fuego, 10 out of 10, and Bieber showed up in a freaking t-shirt and shorts. Like, come on, dude. This is Haley Bieber we're talking about here. She is a gorgeous woman. You should be lucky to have her. Dress appropriately for the occasion, dude. Hey, Josh Allen, learn from his mistakes. Or don't. Still be a stupid idiot. That's fine. She'll leave you anyways. Number 1 for me on my list, because I know I'm going well off the reservation here. This is a pet peeve of mine, and I think it's a pet peeve for all of us who drive, so not you, jerk. It'll be people who lay on their car horns immediately when the light turns from red to green. Like, it's a light. We know it just turned green. Can you relax? Maybe if you didn't take an extra 5 minutes to get your coffee at home, you'd be on time for wherever you had to go. Stop blaming me for your mistakes. And stop telling me that Duncan is good. It's not. It sucks, and we know this for a fact. So stop it with all of that. Abbreviated rant today. It'll be a lot better next week, but I figured I'd give you that just so you have a little more fun.
We do appreciate it, but I gotta wonder, who keeps telling you that Duncan's good, just real quick?
You know what? I don't know who does, but people do, and they're wrong. So stop it.
There we go.
I get a lot of mentions on my Twitter account that, Duncan's good. And I'm like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah. There it is. Well, that completes this week's rant podium. And while it was obviously shorter than most, it is still pretty good, honestly. I did not expect the Justin Bieber shot out of nowhere, but hey, that's the beauty of the rant podium. We literally never know what it's about, and that's the gorgeousness of it, ladies and gentlemen. So I think that just about does it for this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. And as you can tell, with 2 of the guys being on phones this week, there was definitely plenty of chaos behind the scenes. Let's hope for more. Let's hope for a little bit more chaos as well of what it was on the football field as well. As the bottom of the screen says, thank you all so much for joining us this week. We had everything. The week 1 highlights that we went over, we're going to continue that on a weekly basis, and especially as things start to build up, we will be revisiting some of the points we talked about today. Buffalo, I'm looking at you. You better get me the win. We'll do that. The pick challenge, of course, continues next week. Justin's trivia will be back properly next week, so you don't get the store brand trivia that is myself, the equivalent of RC Cola, which, let's be honest, nobody wants. Just like
excuse me.
And at the end of the day,
RC's phenomenal. I'm going to rant on you next week. RC's great. I'm leaving. Get out of here. Goodbye.
And at the end of the day, the rant podium itself will be back. And, well, better than ever. I'll say better than ever, but let's be honest, kind of here nor there. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. And we will see you guys next week for episode number 75. Justin, we're approaching triple digits on the show. God help us all.